Stephen, in March of 2021, I had a memory pop up in my mind, and it was about our first riding mower that my family owned. And this would have been 1974. That summer, I decided to join the Air Force, and so I did. And so 1974, that fall, in October, I left for the Air Force. And at the time, we lived in Broughtontown, Lincoln County, Kentucky, and we had an acre and a half. It had a store, a country store, and a house. And the yard was level, easy to mow. And I had mowed it every time for years with an 18-inch push mower.
Uh-huh.
And lots of times after I got the first few rounds, I would jog with the mower, and I was in good shape. I was 16, 17, 18 years old. It was good for good exercise, but I was the one that mowed the yard, and I was glad to do it. Daddy was working, my brother David was working, and Mom had never mowed, so I was glad to do it. But after I joined the Air Force, they mowed the yard one time. Someone did, either my daddy or my brother, and the next time they needed to mow it, they bought a riding lawnmower. So that little funny story popped into my mind, so I thought I'll share that on Facebook. So I did in March of 2021, and people liked that story. And I had written stories periodically before on Facebook, history and things such as that. But a lot of people encouraged me to write another, so I wrote another story or two, and little funny remembrances and memories from my younger life. Well, it progressed. And first thing you know, I started, the stories were all true. And I tried to oftentimes hide names. I didn't want to embarrass you or anything like that. But people my age, they really resonated with people my age and those older because they had the same shared experiences, just different locale. And so I kept writing these stories, and I got responses I put on Facebook, and after a while I started putting them on, you're from Garrett County, you're from Lincoln County, from Crowd Orchard. And then I put them on If Kentucky's a Part of You. It's another Facebook page. They've really been well received there because that really broadens your audience, So people all over the state and people in other states read those stories, and they like them and they resonate with people. And I'm happy to make people smile. I love to make people smile. And for instance, last April in 2021, there was a lady that I do not know. She says, she just comments on one of my stories. She said, Shelby, I'm sitting at the Markey Cancer Center. My husband is undergoing stage 4 lung cancer treatments. And I am sitting in the car crying my eyes out, can't go in because of COVID. And so she said, after reading your story this morning, like I said, she doesn't know me, she said, I am crying from laughter. And she said, thank you so much for brightening my day. Another lady, a few weeks later, she said, I do not know. She said, Shelby, I thought I would do like I've done for the last several days and just get up and feel sorry for myself. But she said, for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I feel sorry for myself. But she said, your story has given me hope and made me smile. And she said, I'm going to clean up and try to get going.
Yeah.
Well, those really make me feel good, when people say things like that, because you're doing a good deed without forcing yourself on somebody. People don't have to read these stories. Well, as time evolved and I wrote more and more stories, I wrote 3 a week or something like that, no timetable. They easily appeared to my mind, and I thought, well, these need to be recorded. And so people started saying, are you recording these stories? Are you saving these stories? Or are you going to put these stories into a book? So back this past year in February, I went to a publisher. He's a good friend of Comic Nights. He lives in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. And I went to him and told him I'd like to get these stories published. At the time, I had 136 stories written. And so I took 136 on a flash drive. And he said he would do it. He would get the book copyrighted and published and all that. And then we would publish it on demand, just what people needed. So he sent it to a graphics designer in Lexington, and I talked with her on the phone several times and communicated with her. And we came up with I had the stories of my life. And then she helped design the cover. And with our input, Deb and Will and me, we figured out how we wanted the cover to look. So we made a hardbound book, 450 pages, 136 stories of my life. Yeah. And that's what the title was. The title came, a friend wanted me to publish these in the Lancaster newspaper, the Central Record newspaper. And I told him, I said, well, I guess so. I was a little reluctant. And he said, they're too good. People need to read them. And so he said, what are we going to call them? And I said, I don't know. And so then I thought a little bit, and I called him. I said, they're stories of my life. Because, like I said, these stories are true. Occasionally I'll put a joke in there,
Yeah.
But by and large, they're really happened. They absolutely really happened. So every week, the Central Record runs one of these stories. Mm-hmm. And they're running them in just the order that I have written them, and they're working their way. And it'll take them a long time to catch up with 1 week. But I've had several people tell me the only reason I get the paper is because of your stories. And of course, the newspaper industry is declining.
Oh yeah.
And but so people do enjoy that part of the paper, you know, much more than the court records and things such as that. I had a fellow in McDonald's the other day. Devin Will and I were in McDonald's eating, and this fellow comes up to me and he says, do you write for the newspaper? And I said, well, I submit stories for them.
Yeah.
And he said, I love those stories. He said, they really resonate with me. And he said, that's the only reason I get the newspaper. And so hopefully it sells some newspapers for those people. And I don't make any money out of the deal, but the stories are preserved. And Jameson, I have thought, what if my daddy had written stories of his life?
Yeah.
What if Daniel Boone had written the stories of his life? Mm-hmm. Instead of having 3 stories about Daniel Boone, and we had 250 or 300.
Yeah.
And I know they couldn't do that. I'm not saying that. But these stories in the book, they're not in any kind of order. You can read story number 1, then story number 22, then story number 50, and it doesn't matter. You can read the front, back to front to back. They're usually a couple or 3 pages long. Easy to read. The book is it's laid out easy to read,
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been given a gift. God has given me ability to tell stories. Mm-hmm. My daddy had that ability, and I'm able to write those down. Yeah. And I want to write them down so that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren down the road in 200 years from now, they can see how life would have been in Central Kentucky, growing up as a little boy in Central Kentucky in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And the stories I have stories about my Air Force days and the fun things we did there, and the goofy things we did. And there's stories about friends and family, and some of their mishaps. And there's stories about American heroes, local servicemen that gave their lives for the country. Stories along those lines, something very serious. And, the one I posted this morning dealt with dementia and Alzheimer's. It's a sad story. It's a sad story. But it's something that we live with. And 200 years from now, dementia and Alzheimer's may be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
And people say, well, that's tragic. Those people had to deal with that. We got such a ready-made cure now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, we have no ready-made cure.
Yeah.
And so those things are real. And they affect people that we care about so deeply. After the first book was published, I've continued writing, and now I have written 231 stories.
More or total?
Well, from 136 to 231, so 95 more or something like that. Mm-hmm. And when I get 136 more, I'm going to stop at 136. I'll publish volume 2. And I'm real happy for it. And I'm not in the book selling business or anything like that. But a lot of people have bought the books. And of course, I sign them and personalize them. And like I said, they resonate with people.
Yeah.
And when I see the comments and things on Facebook, there's dozens and dozens of people that have told me they never click like or they never comment at all, but they read the stories.
Yeah.
And,
and
that makes me very happy that people read the story, because it's better than the politics you're going to read about, the arguing that you're going to read about, and who's the best president, all this stuff. We need to get too much of that.
Yeah.
And there's too much arguing, and I never have put the first hateful post on, nor will I ever. And none of these stories are hateful or mean spirited in any way.
Yeah.
But they come from my heart, and I'm proud of the stories, and I'm very happy that I can share them with people.
Well, do you want to share maybe an Air Force one? You got one you can share right off?
Yeah, I'll tell you one of our Air Force stories. We had this, when you come together in the Air Force, they put you in a flight. That's your group of people. It's called a flight. And I was in flight 1140 in the 06 Squadron at Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas. Anybody that joins the Air Force goes to Lackland Air Force. They have since probably forever. So we get down there in October the 9th, 1974. And we're a motley crew, and the sergeants tell us, there's 2 sergeants, they tell us quickly, at first chance, you all are the worst group we've ever had. You have to understand, and I think even though I was 18 years old, I understood that this is the game they have to play.
Yeah.
They got to whip us and mold us into shape.
Yeah.
And it's really not personal. Really, maybe we aren't the worst. Maybe we are. But anyway, so we get there, and so we are very excited to know that basic training only lasts 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the key selling points, where Army basic training is 8 weeks, and I think Marines is 12. I'm not sure about Navy, but
Yeah.
so we get there on a Friday. On a Thursday. We get there on a Thursday, and by the time we get to the barracks that evening, it's late, very late. But there's 4 or 5 guys coming from Seattle area that aren't there. So we have to sit on our lockers, and they give us a little handbook that says, read this book, and it will tell you everything. You got to learn everything in this book. Well, it seemed insurmountable at the time, but I start perusing through it, and I'm worn out because first time I ever flown in my life, and flew from Louisville to Dallas, and then from Dallas on another plane to San Antonio. Very exciting, very, very excited. Never had flown in a jet of any type of airplane before, and most of us hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's 50 of us in this flight, and finally about 3 in the morning, these other boys stagger in. Of course, they've been delayed for some reason. So we go to bed about 4 o'clock. Well, at 5 o'clock in the morning, banging on, the lights come on, and there's banging on the garbage can lid with a big piece of metal or baton, and it will wake you up. So you jump out of the bed, and we are there, and a ragtag bunch of 3 or 4 was. I had long hair like a lot of the boys did, and I had saved. I thought I'll just let the Air Force cut it when I get there, and so promptly they did. We took a shower, and then we began our day. So, but anyway, here you are. We were in 2-story barracks, and 25 of us downstairs, 25 upstairs. But you start to know these people that are close to you. And one of the guys in our group had a real goofy look, okay? And I never hear him say 2 words, but he had a real goofy look. And he was always being fussed at by the drill sergeant. Always. He couldn't march.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand straight. He couldn't stand, calm. He was fidgeting and things such as that. And so the sergeant fussed at him all the time. Well, as your basic training progresses, if you're not doing well, you're not keeping up to par with your exercises or with your learning, they will set you back. It's a terminology they use. They'll put you back into the group of people that's 1 week behind you.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if that doesn't work, they might set you back again, after another week or 2. If you still aren't progressing, and then after a while, if you're not progressing, they probably will send you home. They'll just discharge you.
Yeah.
Just say you're just
not happening.
There were boys that I was in the service with that could not do 1 push-up. They could not do 1 sit-up. And they're 18 years old.
Yeah.
They had just never done anything in their. Those boys like me that was from farms, we had no issues with the running and the climbing and the jumping. Some boys had tremendous amounts of trouble with it. This boy here, he was hanging on by a thread with us to keep from being set back, okay?
Yeah.
He was hanging on, and so our sergeants tried to work with him, and of course they cursed him unmercifully, and fussed at him, but he just was hanging on by a thread. So finally, they'd had enough, and so they decided he had to be set back.
Yeah.
And so they moved him back to a flight, different building, and he would be a week behind us. So his basic training was going to be delayed a week.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, our group, we were the 06 squadron. We had a reputation of not being able to march properly. And then when you march, it should be the heel should hit the ground at the time. Thump, thump.
Yeah.
Everybody in unison, okay? That's how marching is done properly. So, a friend of mine, the one boy I met, he was from Queens, New York, and his last name was Touhill, Touhill, good guy. So I'm from rural Kentucky, he's from Queens, New York, could not be different backgrounds.
Yeah.
But he and I are assigned the job of being the road guards. There's 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And when the group got to a road, the 2 guys in the front broke forward, and they went out and stopped the traffic in each direction. We crossed the road, halfway across the road. The Touhill and I ran and tapped them on the shoulder. They went back to the front and began marching again. We kept the traffic stopped until our platoon had passed, our group had passed, our flight had passed, and so then we ran and got back in position. We walked 6 steps behind. So Toohey and I had a little freedom, maybe that the others didn't, because the sergeant stands about 2/3 back, and he really don't see us as he's not looking directly at us as he's looking at the rest of it. But we marched, and we don't march very well most of the time. One morning you're required in basic training to complete 2 parades. You have to march in 2 parades during basic training to be able to graduate. So we go to these parades, and as we're coming along, we're walking in the nighttime. We got our little flashlights, and we're just step, step, step. And I hear these sergeants. They said, "There comes the 06 squadron." And the other sergeant said, "How can you tell?" He said, "They're always out of step." So it wasn't just this one woman. There were several of us that were not good. And two and I, like I said, we were more of a sauna in the back. We were. But when you're out of step in the middle of a formation of 50 people, it becomes a problem for the people behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a thing called change step. You can scoot your foot up and make a little scooting sound, and to get back in step. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's change step march. And so sometimes you have to do that. If the guy in front of you is, to keep your feet from stepping on his ankles, his heels, you have to do that. You have to. So it makes kind of a scuffing sound. Well, we get to the parade, and so our sergeant says, "Guys, you got to get it right. You got to get it right. You all are terrible marchers." And he's trying. He's doing everything he can do without killing us. But so when we get there, they decide that we need to be hooked up with our sister flight, which is directly across the street from us. There's 50 guys there. And so we're 100, and so it's real simple. They say if you're taller than the guy in front of you, tap him on the shoulder, and if you're taller than the guy beside you, tap him on the shoulder.
Yeah.
So it has a uniformity to it. The taller people it's kind of like this. Here's a parade over here, and people can see, and you can see the shorter people going up here, and the taller people coming back to this way. And anyway, it's supposed to look real nice. So we do that, and that's. It's just like hieroglyphics to some of the guys. They can't grasp that concept. Well, you're not taller than me. And so there's a near fisticuffs break out. But we finally get the reins. And so once again, though, Toohey and I are still the road guards from this. So the deal is this. You walk onto the parade ground and you make it's an oval. And then when you get up to the reviewing stand, that becomes blacktop. And it's a little short stand of blacktop, probably 100 yards. And that's where all the officials are, the generals and the captains and the colonels, and they watch you and they grade you how you're doing, And so that's your time to shine during this on the stage part. So we get with these 50 people we really don't know who live across the street, and so it's our turn. And so here comes the 06 squadron. So we step into formation and we start making our turn. Head down the back stretch. Things look good. Thump. Thump, thump, looking good. We start making the turn, thump, thump. I mean, I think this is fantastic. We never have sounded so good. We're concentrating. So then as you get to the blacktop and you really hear the thump, the different kind of blacktop. It's all blacktop, but this is it's a different color. But then there's a military procedure called eyes right.
Yeah.
And so you turn your head at 45-degree angle to look toward the viewing stand, all except this first row. They keep looking straight ahead. But these other columns, the guys are all turned eyes right.
Yeah.
And so you continue walking. So Toohey and I are in the back, and of course we do the eyes right. And we're thump, thump. And it just sounds so good. It's perfect. The unison is perfect. And then all of a sudden you hear this, people start stepping on each other. And you hear people falling, and you hear these people scooting, and it's more of a skip. We skip by them. Well, I'm watching these officials in the stands, and they're bent over double life because they are tickled to death with this bunch of goofballs marching. We have to come to a complete halt, reorient ourselves, pick people up, scrape off bloody knees, and then continue on. Total and abstract failure. I mean, complete failure. Well, this one boy, they felt like he was maybe as much had to do with it as anybody, so they set him back after that parade. He just, you're the call. Well, lo and behold, every week they chose a flight of the week.
Yeah.
And one flight was distinguished and outstanding. Well, we get out to the parade grounds one day, reviewing grounds one day, and we look, and here comes the flight. They're a week behind us that this boy's with, and there's this boy carrying the flight of the week flag. He looks at us and just has a little sheepish grin, and our sergeant just cussing unmercifully. And then the next week they won it again. We never won it, and we probably were holding him back. Is what it looks like. But that's just one of the stories.
He wasn't the problem.
He was not the problem. God bless him. He was not the problem. But there's all kinds of stories like that, and they're funny, and they really happen,
Mm-hmm.
And,
looking to your right can really throw you off completely.
Completely throw you off. Yes, it can completely throw you off. We were going to do the obstacle course one time, and we did it with our sister flight. Your sister flight they came the same day you did. They're just 50 different boys in a different building, but they're your arch enemy that you have to compete against.
Yeah.
Beat them at anything.
Yeah.
Anything they don't. If you can't beat them at that, then you're just awful.
Yeah.
It gives you some incentive, I guess. So anyway, we have to do this obstacle course. You have to swing on ropes and jump things and monkey bars, and so I had been raised in a good Christian home, and I was taught to be respectful and kind and polite.
Yeah.
So we start crossing a great big mud hole, and it's probably water's 4 foot deep, and it's muddy, and it's October. It's not cold, but it's not warm in San Antonio. So we're working our way across these probably 30-foot long monkey bars across this big pool of water. You're not going to drown in the pool of water, but you're going to get really messy if you fall into it. So as I work my way, these are no issues for me. I can do it easy because, I'm in good shape. This little boy has got halfway, and he's froze. He can't go any further. So I, of course, pull in right behind him on the next bar behind him. Then there's 22 people behind me. Mm-hmm. My sergeant happens to be the person who's officiating that obstacle, and he fusses at the boy and says, "Get going, son, get going, get going." Of course, he's from our sister flight, and he says, "Hopkins, kick him off." And I said, "Sir," he said, "Hopkins, kick him off." Well, I was reluctant. I don't want to kick you. He said, I don't really know him, but I just don't want to kick him off. And so, "Hopkins, if you don't kick him off, I'm going to come and kick you off." So I take my foot reluctantly, and I'm raising it up, and I'm putting it right in the small of his back. Yeah. And just before I kicked him off, his little hands, you can see his little fingers just, and then he's gone. Yeah. Well, as I flew across, at the last I heard, my sergeant was still cussing me for not doing exactly what he told me. Of course, they're pulling this little boy out of the bucket of mire. So then, just in a couple obstacles later, you have to swing across a rope. You grab a rope and you swing across a puddle like that, like Tarzan would do. Yeah. Well, this little boy that went in front of me, a different little boy, he goes in front of me from my sister flight. He don't grab the rope high enough, and therefore he swings into the water. Yeah. Well, then he don't let the rope come back toward me as far as it needs to go. He starts wading out of the water. Well, the rope, Michael Jordan couldn't have jumped off the rope. So I don't jump. Yeah. Well, the sergeant there, he just cursed me. "What is wrong? Why don't you jump? You got to get that rope." Well, I didn't say anything. Of course, couldn't say anything, but I thought, I can't, no chance I could have caught that rope. High jumper, long jumpers can't catch that rope. So anyway, he has a hook on a pole, and he reaches with the hook, and he pulls the rope to him on the other side, and he's cussing us unmercifully. "Whoever don't grab this rope, I'm going to go over and drown you, beat you to death with this pole," or whatever they want to say. Bad stuff. A lot of cussing. So he swings it to Shelby, and he swings it fine. And so I jump up and grab it high, and so I swing across there. But I devise in my mind a plan. And, of course, he's still cussing everybody about me not grabbing the rope. So I devise a plan. And as I get out of the water, I land on the other bank. Instead of swinging the rope back, I just let it go easy. Uh-huh. And when I did, of course the sergeant's on that other side. When I did, it don't go back nearly far enough. And I hear this little boy, gigantic splash, more cursing, and they're cursing when I leave. I thought, because I was scared not to jump because he told him so much. But anyway, we survived it, and we moved on. But there's stories like that in the book. And we decided to go swimming at Broughtontown Lake one time. And
There's a lake in Broughtontown?
There was a lake at Broughtontown down right there past the school. You go over the
Yeah.
hill into the, I don't remember what the bottom is called, but you just go over there and there's a lake there. They built two of those lakes. They built Buck Creek Lake, which is still there, and then there's Broughton Lake down at the bottom of the hill there. And it's down in behind where my great grandfather used to live. But anyway, there was some Mullins family lived down there beside. Well, the lake was a real nice lake, and it was probably 20 acres or something like that.
Yeah.
15 acres,
Yeah.
something like that. And they had built them. Army Corps of Engineers built them sometime, I guess, for floods and stuff like that. But anyway, it was Broughton Lake. So we decided one day, Jerry Middleton comes over, and he has got a new car. It's not new, but it's new to him. And he paid about $800 for it, which was a lot of money back then. And it was a Buick or Pontiac or something like that, or Oldsmobile. It was a full-size sedan. And this would have been 1973 or something, or 74. And it was a nice car, and he was proud of it. We were all happy he had it. He's a neighbor boy, Jerry was, a very good guy. And so Scotty Taylor and my brother David and Jerry and I, we decided we're going to go to Broughton Lake swimming. Well, there was a lane that you go past the Mullins house, and there's a little dirt lane that drove up to the lake. And you would park on this side of the dam. You climb the dam and go swim.
Yeah.
There's a spillway. It's a great place to swim, fish, and camp and all that. So we decided this lane was probably 200 yards long. And it was more weeds than anything else, and not much. There's hardly any traffic. The reason there wasn't any traffic because about 50 feet up the lane was this gigantic mud hole. It encompassed the whole little lane, and so people had driven around it. You could see, and of course, the more they try to drive around it, it just wallows it out. And and we don't know how big a mud hole is, but it seems pretty daunting. So we decide that. We don't want, after we get out of the lake, we're going to have to climb the dam, but we don't want to have to walk back down this weed-covered and dirty lane. So we think it'd be good if we could drive up to the dam. It'd be a lot less walking, stay cleaner, it won't, track and get it caught.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we said, Jerry, I don't know if you can go around it or not, because he's a full-size car. And we said, Jerry had his doubts too. He said, I don't know. He said, I don't want to mess up my car, nothing like that. And so we said, I don't know if you can do it or not, And so Jerry said, I think I'm going to give it. Of course, he's 18 years old.
Yeah.
Got all the confidence where he said, there's no danger.
Yeah.
I mean, it's level there for all practical purposes. But where these people have been driving around, it became about a 45-degree angle. There's no danger of anything like that, but there's a real danger of getting stuck. So we work our way up through there. And so I'm sitting in the back passenger seat on the driver's side. Jerry's driving. My brother David's in the passenger seat up front. Scotty's to my right in the back. Two in the front, two in the back. Well, we get up there, and so Jerry said, Jerry, hold it as tight as up the hill as you can. And he could only get so far because there was a fence there, And so he was as tight at that fence as he could. And we get the front around through there, but the back tire slips a little bit. And it slipped just a little more, and in 2 seconds, that whole car, the back of it, just sunk into this gigantic mud hole. Well, I felt like I was on the Titanic because water is coming in my window. I mean, it's a flood. Now it looks like we're going to infinity and beyond. Where is the bottom of this hole? Well, we scrambled. Dave and Scotty jump out their passenger side doors. Of course, the car is at a steep angle like this. So Jerry slides across. Of course, water's gushing in his window too, gushing in my window. But mine was much worse because the front was a little more out of the water. The front, the motor and things was out of the water, but the front seat had water about half across it, about a foot deep. The back seat was completely covered. My window, you can see the left side of the window on my side because I practically swim out.
Yeah.
So we look. The trunk is completely buried, except maybe the right tail lights. On the back side. It's completely engulfed. And Jerry's bemoaning the fact, well, I have lost my car. I mean, paid $800 for it today, and now it's destroyed. And it is. It's destroyed. So what are we going to do? And we're a long way from anywhere. And it's no cell phones. And probably 3 miles to the closest house. The Mullins family were not at home. 3 miles to the closest house. So what are we going to do? So lo and behold, we get lucky. Here comes a station wagon down the road. And this is a infrequently traveled road. This station wagon, we know these guys. Well, they're two town drunks, okay? So, notorious drunks. So they pull into six. They both wearing little hats. They're both in their late 50s, early 60s. And wouldn't harm a flea, but just drunks. I mean, complete alcohol. You boys got a problem, don't you? Yeah, we got a problem. So we'll help you. We'll pull you out. And they got a little station wagon, a little Dodge station
Yeah.
wagon. They said, I don't know if that's going to be possible. And they, yeah, we pull you out. So they said, before we do anything, we have to sing one. And we said, okay, what is that? So we all had to line up, the 6 of us.
Yeah.
And we put our arms around each other's shoulders. This was the required method to do it. And we sang, I've been working on the railroad all the live long time. And so the 2 drunks argued with each other about, you don't have it right, we're not lined up right. So there was a lot of arguing going on there between them 2. But we finally get the song rehearsed and sung, okay?
Yeah.
So we hook the chain to it. Jerry climbs down there in the water up to his hind end and hooks it around, the axle or something like that to try to pull it out. This seems like an effort in futility, but we're going to give it a whirl.
Yeah.
We have no other option. So the first guy gets in there, and of course his car had to be sitting on a pretty steep angle as well.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way the lay of the land was at that point. So he gets in the car, and as soon as he sits down, he is so drunk, he falls over completely and falls out the other door. So we pick him up. The other guy said, you know what you're doing? So yeah, I do. So after much arguing, we get back in and we get him in and we get him, secure. He's holding on to the steering wheel this time. So he starts giving it gas, and there's not moving a smidge, not a smidge. So the other guy cusses him, you need to let me drive. I can drive, okay?
Yeah.
So we get one man out and get the other man, but first we have to sing again. We line up again. We have to get in our appropriate places. Everybody had to stand in a certain place with their arms around each other's shoulders, and we sung I've been working on the railroad, 2 or 3 verses. So, and we're just hanging on. So this other guy gets in there. So the first thing he does after he gets in, he's probably a little less drunk, but not much.
Yeah.
So he backs up, and he gets some good slack in the chain.
Yeah.
Okay? So then he dropped a hammer on that little Dodge, and he peeled rubber and throwed rocks over what little bit of glass was showing, snapped that chain in 2 just like that. He shot down that little 50-foot lane and across that little gravel road, 100 miles an hour, through the fence and out into the field. Looked like Mario Andretti driving.
Yeah.
Thank goodness there wasn't nothing coming down that little road because he'd have run over him. So we had to go over there and get that car out. Of course, the fence was scraggly old fence, and it didn't really mount to anything. We kind of propped it up a little, get the car out. So then we realized, well, this is not going to work. So Jerry's brother James had a big record, and they said, well, let's just go get James's record. So Dave and Jerry was going to go with him to go with him, get there, but we had the same one again. So Dave and Jerry then, to ride the 3 miles or 4 that was necessary to get to James's record, Dave said they stopped 4 times and in the car and sung I've been working on the record. Finally get to James. James finally comes, an hour and a half later, and he hooks a big cable to it, and it's all that big record could do to pull the car out.
Yeah.
And the car was destroyed. They had to,
Wow.
I think they got some parts off of it, but it was destroyed. I think it was destroyed. But that was our Jerry's car and stuff.
Yeah. I think the old drunks were just there for the good time. Oh gosh. Well, Jay, that'd be rough. $800 for, and then gone for in one day. Yes. Whew. Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, the book has got lots of stories like that, and like I said, some of them have. I'll tell you one more while I'm talking. And I wrote this story not long ago. I was doing some genealogy. I love genealogy, and I came across this man whose name was Apsie, A-P-S-I-E, Apsie Lee Long, and he was up from Rockcastle County, and he was a distant relative. But anyway, I found out about this guy. There's a picture of him. He's riding a white mule, and he's a young man, and he's from Clarence, Kentucky. And in northern Pulaski County. And anyway, he's born in 1896. His mom died when he was about 6 years old. And then 1918, he is drafted into the Army, to World War I. And of course, the war is not going to last much longer. The United States only fought about 1.5 years in there, but the World War itself, 20 million people were killed. So Apsie's drawn into this conflict. He went to Camp Zachary Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky for his basic training, and then he had additional training to work in the medical corps.
Yeah.
Like as a medic or something like that. But anyway, to make a long story short, then he was in Pennsylvania for a little bit, and then he gets on a ship in New York City, and he travels to I don't know if he went to London or where he went, but to one of the ports over there. And then soon he was taken across, across to France. And by this time, the Germans are being pushed back, but still the fighting is
brutal,
terrible.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Carnage. They've in World War I, they've got guns that they've never had in the history of the world, and people are killing each other in ways that's never been killed before.
Yeah.
You can kill people from miles away. And you hunkered in those trenches, and there you dealt with rats and just unsanitary conditions and anything in the world that could be bad. Disease was rampant. Then here come these shells in and just destroy and mangle people. So Apsey gets there, and he stays about 3 weeks, and then he's killed in October. He's probably only on the ground in the war zone about 3 weeks. And then about 4 weeks later, the war's over on November. So he's buried in France, and then later is brought back to the cemetery there. It's at Fairview Cemetery.
Yeah.
The Fairview Cemetery there in the Rockcastle County. But I describe that story as an American hero.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no awards or citations for bravery for Apsey Long. He doesn't even have a military stone. He was just brought back to Kentucky and buried. And here's a little guy from Clarence, Kentucky, who, through no fault of his own, was drafted into the Army.
Mm-hmm.
He wound up in Louisville, he wound up in Pennsylvania, he wound up in New York City, and then he wound up in probably London or one of those suburbs there. And then he winds up in France. And then he winds up 3 weeks later dead.
Yeah.
He did what he was asked to do. And so I think he was 22 years old.
Yeah.
And that to me is an American hero.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do anything to ask for that. He didn't deserve that. But he was a victim of his time.
Yeah.
And bless his heart, it finished him off.
Yeah.
And but there's stories like that in the book. And I'm real proud of my book. I'm happy I've written it, and I'm happy I'm continuing to write it.
Well.
And I'll be happy to talk to anybody about it at any time.
Well, we'll get volume 2 soon enough.